Thank you. So I am one of the joint hires, interdisciplinary hires at the University of Georgia through the University of Georgia's Interdisciplinary Faculty Hiring Initiative. So that's really what I'm going to focus on today. I'd also like to recognize several of my other fellow joint hires who also took time out of their busy pre-tenure schedules to provide some input into this presentation. So they're listed as well on this introductory slide. So I really appreciate them providing input so you don't just get my perspective. Let's see, do I progress? All right. So from several of the other talks today, and I'm sure later in the afternoon as well, you're hearing a lot about the importance of an interdisciplinary approach. So I won't really belabor this, but maybe I'll just give an example from my experience to motivate this. And it really goes along with the past two speakers as well. Prior to joining the University of Georgia, I worked for several years in research and development at Novartis Pharmaceuticals, which is a major pharmaceutical company. And I worked in a department called Modeling and Simulation. And this department consisted of, the objective of this department was to use engineering and mathematical and statistical approaches to help clinical teams and help the company make better data-driven decisions. Most of the people in the department did not have specific training in the exact problems that we were trying to solve. Most of us came from backgrounds of either engineering or statistics or pharmacology. But when we were solving problems, we were expected to integrate across these disciplines to approach our various problems. And in addition to that, we worked on complex clinical teams, so not just with folks from our department, but we were working with physicians and regulatory affairs and bench scientists and even branding and marketing, process development, so a wide range of groups and departments across the company, to identify and solve problems. So my observation from working there was that, when you come into a group like that, there's a very steep learning curve. And the folks who were the most successful were the ones who could really adapt and integrate across disciplines and not just stick to the discipline in which they were trained. And also those who could learn to communicate and speak the language of other departments. And a lot of that is just practice, right? It's just having the experience and practice doing it and recognizing the importance of it. So I think in training our students, we really need to give them opportunities to move between fields. It's really important to have rigor and expertise in your own field, but it's also really important these days to be able to move across fields and reach beyond your area of training. So I think an interdisciplinary approach is really advantageous to our students. We need to be providing that. It's also advantageous to faculty. We can go after larger and bigger questions if we're able to move across fields, and that has advantages for the university as well. But there are some challenges to that within the university setting. Universities are by necessity and by nature, we are segmented into silos. So you need to have departments in order to have areas of expertise and rigor within a field. And just for the necessity of administrative work, you have to have departments. I'm in one of my departments, or one of my colleges at UGA is the College of Engineering, and we are a new college. And as of right now, we don't have departments, and we've branded ourselves as a college without boundaries. But as our college grows, we're finding it's really, really difficult to maintain that open environment, that open structure, and we really, by necessity, we're having to think about dividing ourselves into groups by our expertise. It's the nature and necessity that we have these silos, but this generates problems in identifying and implementing interdisciplinary opportunities. It's often really hard to know what's going on outside of your specific silo or department. So we need to have a way to form, a consistent way to form relationships between these colleges and departments. So at University of Georgia, we're testing this hypothesis that interdisciplinary faculty who are members of two different colleges or departments can form permanent links that help fertilize relationships and opportunities for interdisciplinary learning over the long term. So the idea is that these will be permanent relationships, or long-term relationships at least, that help build bridges between these departments. So this the Presidential Hiring Initiative was started in 2014, and there was funding provided for 16 faculty positions. The requirements for these positions is that they should be focused on areas of emerging statewide and global significance. They should capitalize on areas of strength and create new collaborative opportunities for faculty already within the university. And they should reach across traditional academic boundaries. The positions are funded 70% by the Office of the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and by the Provost, and the remaining 30% is split between participating departments. So in order to identify opportunities for these joint positions, schools and colleges were invited to submit proposals, which they did, and then these were reviewed by committee and selected by the Provost's office. So the next couple of slides show the 16 positions that were funded. I won't read through all of these in detail. I'll spare you that. But this is just to give you some sense for the types of positions that were filled, that were funded. So for instance, there's a joint position between computer science and cell biology, looking at biological imaging and brain mapping. Or there's a position in digital arts between telecommunications and theater and film. There's a position in fiber and polymer science between the College of Engineering and the textiles, merchandising, and interior within family and consumer sciences. On the next slide, there's a position between the Institute of Gerontology, which is within public health, and housing and consumer economics, which is within the College of Family and Consumer Sciences, and that's looking at housing for older adults. There's a position in molecular ecology and global change between ecology and the genetics department. So that's just to give you a flavor for the types of positions that we have. And just to visualize this, these are a list of some of the colleges and schools within University of Georgia that are participating in this interdisciplinary hiring field. And it's not that there weren't previously relationships between these colleges. You know, they kind of exist and they come and go. But the idea is that by having joint faculty positions, these will form, kind of long-lasting bonds that help establish deeper relationships between these colleges and facilitate greater opportunities for identifying ways to work together. And the idea is to avoid this situation, right? So we want this to be, when we talk about interdisciplinary efforts, they should really be a we and not an us versus them. So, you can call it interdisciplinary, but I don't think that this is exactly what we have in mind. So now I'll just give you a few examples of some of the faculty positions, the work that's ongoing. Again, these positions started in 2014, so most of us arrived at UGA last summer, so it's been about a year. But I think already we begin to see some of the fruits of this initiative, so I'd just like to share those with you through examples. Dr. Suzanne Birch has a joint position between anthropology and geography. She studies human adaptation and resilience to climate change and natural resources unpredictability in prehistory. And she uses this to understand how our past response to environmental changes affects some of the current thinking. And to do this, she combines archaeology with biogeochemistry to investigate changes in diet, mobility, and settlement systems in the period from the last ice age until the arrival of farming. And so she feels that, because she has this interdisciplinary background, she's really able to blend longer-term perspectives into her geography courses, thanks to her background in archaeology. And at the same time, she's able to discuss spatial variations in much more depth when she's teaching anthropology courses. Also, when she's mentoring students who have an interest that spans both areas, she has access to the resources and the expertise within both colleges. So this allows her to guide her students much better, and it allows her to provide them with, a broader range of expertise to help them along their way. She's also found that by being a joint appointment, this has opened up opportunities for joint NSF proposals between both of her departments that likely wouldn't have been possible if she didn't have this joint appointment and wasn't aware of all the things that were going on in both of her departments. Dr. Scott Nesbitt, who I think is here today, he has a joint position between historical preservation, which is within the College of Environment and Design, and history, which is within the College of Arts and Sciences. So he explores the intersection between digital tools and humanistic questions, and particularly he's interested in areas of history and spaces of the American South. And so when he's working in the historic preservation department, he's been able to carve out a niche that allows him to expand their offerings by incorporating interpretation of Southern historical sites and cultural landscapes, and how changing technologies affect historical preservation practice. In the history department, he's been able to build on some of their emerging strengths in digital and computational methods. And he also finds that his historical data and interpretation methods are really a draw to the historical preservation department for students who come from a background in history. And it's opened opportunities for him to collaborate in an interdisciplinary way with people in his department from other backgrounds, like landscape architectures and planners. Dr. Brian Jordan has a joint position between veterinary medicine in the population health department there and poultry science within the agricultural and environmental sciences college. He is interested in understanding outcomes of vaccination against respiratory diseases in poultry, and particularly investigating areas where current vaccination programs can be made more efficient and effective. Because he has this diverse background in both agriculture, biotechnology, and poultry science, he's able to provide a wider range of experience to the students in his classes and the students that he mentors. Also, he was telling me that there's really a pressing need within the animal sciences and avian disease biotechnology field for students who not only have some of the animal science background, but also know the molecular techniques that are currently used. So he's able to mentor and generate students who can feel these industry needs. In his research, he feels a gap in the understanding of the interaction between poultry science and poultry disease. And so by having a background in both of these fields, he's able to design proper experiments to address this interaction. Another example is Dr. Shannon Quinn, who has a joint appointment between computer science and cell biology. And it's a mouthful to describe his research, but I'll try. It's at the intersection of machine learning, computer vision, distributed computing, translational medicine, and public health. But basically, he investigates how large-scale spectral graph analytics can be used as a tool for knowledge discovery. And so again, he also finds that because he has an awareness of the background of all of the students, both from cell biology and computer science, he knows what courses they've taken, he knows what the programs are within both those colleges. So when he designs joint courses for these students, he's able to really quickly bring them up to speed and fill in those knowledge gaps so that they're all on the same page. And also, again, having a higher level perspective for both fields allows him to provide a broader picture when he's mentoring students. And then because he has a unique research niche within both of his departments, he kind of becomes the go-to person from both departments, which allows him to facilitate relationships between himself and other folks in his department, but also between folks across departments. And it also provides freedom for exploring novel ideas. And I think this is something that we'll all agree with, that all of the interdisciplinary hires would agree with, that you're not really expected to fall within one silo. You're by nature interdisciplinary, and it gives you a little bit more freedom in terms of the things that you feel comfortable exploring. And then for myself, I won't include a picture since you can see me here. But my research, as Dr. Rock said, I study quantitative systems pharmacology. So this really means using mathematical models to try to understand the physiology of the body, and particularly cardiovascular disease and kidney disease, and how the body responds to therapy in a quantitative way. And I use this, first of all, to try to answer questions related to identifying new targets and developing drugs and designing clinical trials. But I'm also interested in developing interactive mobile health tools. So taking a lot of the continuous large data that we're collecting on patients these days from things like continuous glucose monitors and inserting those into mathematical models that can make predictions and simulations of future scenarios that patients can then use in a gamified way, so kind of encapsulating them into a game that can help with improving patient adherence. So particularly the second project I described is a very interdisciplinary research project. So I have students from engineering and biostatistics, but also we're working with a behavioral pharmacologist and someone from psychology, and of course clinicians. And within engineering, we have a guy who specializes in virtual reality, and another guy who's more on the mechatronics side. So there's a very interdisciplinary project, and I think it would have been really difficult to get going on this if I were just within the College of Engineering, because engineering is my background, and I know that. But having these links from with public health and the medical side, I think has really been beneficial with that project. I think also coming from a background where I worked in industry and I worked on complex teams, I think that really informs the teaching and the mentoring that I provide and the types of assignments that I give and the expectations that I have for students. And then in terms of courses, I think it's allowed me to design some courses that are truly interdisciplinary. So we're working on a course called pharmacometrics, and it draws from engineering, epidemiology, biostatistics, and pharmacy. And it's a graduate course that can really provide students with some of those skills that are used in the pharma industry, but also in a lot of the federal regulatory agencies in terms of regulating drugs and medical devices. We're also working between colleges to develop a certificate program in clinical trials. And then the last couple of comments I'll make is that I feel that having this relationship between both colleges really helps make these long-term connections, not just for my own research, but for my colleagues in both departments. So I can listen to. I guess we kind of serve as the eyes and ears. We listen to what our other colleagues are working on, and we look for opportunities to connect. But to be, completely balanced, there are challenges to having interdisciplinary positions. First, it can be quite challenging to find the right candidate who can contribute well to both colleges. So, I think that we conducted 16 searches, and some of them had to be repeated because it can be difficult to find just that right person. Promotion and tenure processes give all of us a little bit of anxiety because it's much more complicated when you're talking about two colleges and departments versus just one. And interdisciplinary, we face competing expectations sometimes from multiple academic communities. So, the way that our research and teaching is viewed from one department or area can be quite different from how it's viewed from another. So we have to try to balance that. It increases the faculty meetings and administrative work, and our job titles are quite long. So as you may have noticed, when I introduce myself, it's a little complicated. When someone says, "What department are you in?" and I can't just say, "Oh, engineering." I say, "Well, I'm in engineering, but I'm also in the College of Public Health within the Department of Epidemiology and Biostatistics," and it always raises questions. I mean, I think it's good because it generates conversation, but it makes it difficult to make a concise business card. But we do have to avoid also the perception of being a jack of all trades, master of none, because being interdisciplinary and being broad is good, but we also have to, avoid the perception that we don't have depth, because I think that we do. And there's, along with that, there's, sometimes overcoming intellectual bias if you work into two different fields where they may judge the other. Some of your colleagues may judge the other field a little harshly. But with that, I'd like to conclude, and thank you for your time, for listening, and I'll take any questions.
Hi, Angel Quallig-Foland, University of Florida, and I'm in Women's Studies and History, so I appreciate what you were saying. I wanted to connect your comments to the previous speakers in terms of graduate training. When you're training people in an interdisciplinary environment, it's very different, I would guess, than training them within a disciplinary environment. So how do you work that in terms of what you're imagining those students you work with will go on and do, what kinds of jobs they'll get, and that connection?
Right. No, I think that that's definitely true, that we have to, I think that any graduate student's mentor has to keep that in mind, right? We want to give them this interdisciplinary, it's the T-shape as one of the earlier speakers described it, right? We want to give them this interdisciplinary approach, and I think that that's nothing but beneficial for them as they move forward. But it's also important to make sure that we're keeping that depth of expertise within a particular field as well. That answers your question.
Hi, this is Meg Portillo from the University of Florida. I was wondering if you could reflect a little bit on how you're being mentored, as well as how you're going to develop your cadre of students who you will mentor. So with these 16 cluster hires, is there a formal mechanism in place to continue to meet and share experiences and talk about challenges and opportunities within somewhat this unique
Right.
position that you have? Or are you doing it on an informal level? And then how do you see yourself, in 5, 7, 10 years? What kind of lab and grouping of students that you'll have at the master's and PhD and undergraduate level?
So I guess to address the first question, it is done, in terms of the interdisciplinary hires, it is done pretty informally right now. There's not really a formal way in which we interact, but I think, even just in preparing this talk, I think it was really useful to get input from all of the other faculty hires. But I think you make a good point that I think there's probably a lot more that we could be learning from each other, and I think actually in doing this presentation, even in putting it together, we discussed, we need to make maybe perhaps a little more formal, a formal way to approach that, because we each get mentoring within our own departments, but in our 2 different departments, and actually within my colleges, I'm fortunate to have a kind of a joint team between my 2 colleges to mentor me specifically, but perhaps I miss out on some of the inputs from other interdisciplinary hires who are going through the same uncertainty with tenure and things like that. And then in terms of 5 to 10 years, where I see myself in terms of mentoring students, I think it's kind of already started. I have a biostatistics PhD student and an engineering master's student right now, and they're already starting to work together, and actually a physics undergraduate student. And it's been really fun to see them start working together, and I feel like they can learn so much from each other, because engineers sometimes resist the statistical side of things. So I think that interaction particularly, I think statistics is something that engineers really, really need much more of, and I'm kind of excited to be able to have students from both sides working together on that.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Sides from the University of Arkansas. Just to follow up with the question there, I'm here.
Okay.
I like the notion that you have the faculty that are in computer science and then maybe cell biology, and so you're able to mentor students from one area or the other. But are there mechanisms in place that allow students to come to you and say, I would like to design my own coursework and have an interdisciplinary degree per se, and create my own degree program?
I don't think within the colleges that I'm in right now, there's nothing like that I'm aware of. Within engineering, it's a pretty new college, and we have a lot of flexibility in terms of helping them select courses. But the title of the degree will still be engineering. So yeah, I'm not aware of that. It may exist within other colleges and departments within the university. I think we're being told we're out of time.
Question? Yeah.
Sure.
Gus Koussoulis from Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. I understand that the incentive primarily came from the provost office, so these positions were funded at 70% or so from the provost office. But how do you really evaluate these positions? You mentioned it. Is there a primary department where you get tenure? Is it 50-50? Is the provost office involved in evaluating these positions?
The provost office is not involved. It's done differently for each position, because certain ones are more in one college than the other. My position is 50-50, but technically I'm 51-49. My home is in engineering, but I will still get my tenure review committee will still involve faculty member from both colleges, but it is done on an individual basis, because I think each college and department is so different. It really has to be kind of done on that individual way.
a joint tenure committee. So it's not two different tenure committees.
No,
in
no,
different
it's
departments.
a
There's
single
actually a
tenure
joint-
committee. Yeah, it's a joint committee. Yep. All right. Thank you.